Hi and welcome to HD Morf, the channel dedicated to the source of the mechanical knowledge of human design. In this series we will delve into the depths of the individual lines for each or the 64 gates of the Rave I Ching as described by Ra Uru Hu. The structure of every video contains general information about the gate as well as details for each line. Each gate represents a separate hexagram. We will start with a description of the hexagram line structure and the detailed meaning of the fourth line, followed by the general description of Gate 41 and its fourth line. If you are already familiar with some of the information, skip to the next relevant section. For convenience we have split the video into sections, which you can check in the description below. Hexagram line structure. Awareness is something that is of enormous importance to all of us. We are going into a very deep level into the nature of the lines. First we have to come to grips with the nature of the hexagram and how it operates. A hexagram is made up of two trigrams, a lower and an upper trigram which is made up of 3 lines each. They have a distinct relationship to each other. The first line, which is the base of the lower trigram, the ground floor of the base trigram, has a similar relationship to the fourth line which is the baseline of the upper trigram. There is consistent relationship between the lower and the upper trigram, but their functions are different and the nature of their wave and frequency is different. Human design is a logical process which is rooted in the capacity for things to be organized. We do not live in an organized world, that is, we have a structure of patterns that we overlay over the subjective chaos at different areas, beginning at the most mundane level with our relationships, whether they are personal or transpersonal. The nature of human design and the information that we will share with you in terms of how the lines work. When we look at the emotional system, we look at the nature of the waves, and we see that in the emotional system there are 6 different waves which are generated by the 6th gate being the motor gate of the solarplex system. Out of that gate come the different waves, different gears in the emotional system. There is a parallel to this on the other side. You should keep in mind when we go through this process of looking through the awareness frequencies from the 1st to the 6th, that they are in resonance and harmony with the 6 emotional waves. In other words, the first emotional wave and the first awareness frequency belong to each other. Fourth lines. When we shift and come to the upper trigram, we come to a different process. We come to the second floor of the house. In the work that I do with the emotional wave system out of the solarplex and out of the 6th gate, there is a frequency change in the wave that is a change that takes place in the intervals of the emotional wave, once you get to the upper trigram. It is a different process. Everything about the upper trigram is no longer concerned about the nature of the gate that is already instilled. By the time you get to the fourth line, there is no question about being introspective or projective or adaptive. All of that is past now. All of that is part of what is there below you as you stand there on the second floor, though it is also the beginning of the second floor. It is the foundation of this second half of this hexagram process. In this foundation, when you come to the fourth line you come to the keynote of externalization which can best be understood through the 43.4, the one-track mind. This is externalization, but it is very narrow and fixed. It is the externalization of a fixed aspect of that gate's nature. These people can be obsessively fixed in their externalization. I want to get my thing across. This is not a matter of any of the lower trigram aspects. This is about, I know that you are on the other side. I know what you do there and I will externalize this in you, whether you like it or not. You will get this because my job is to get to the other side of the channel. So it is very fixed. Hexagram 41. Keyword, decrease. Theme, contraction. Center, root. The pressure centers are of enormous importance, like all things. We are basically a sandwich. You have a pressure above and a pressure below, and everything else is just squashed in the middle. Those pressures rule the nature of the world that we live in. They fuel all of the basic potentials of what it is to be in a body, of what it is to live out the consciousness of being a human being. They are essential and they are always present. When I say they are always present, that is not a matter of whether you have them personally in your design, or not. As long as it is in the world, it is a part of the aura of the world and everybody gets in contact with it. So in looking at these pressure centers, please understand that we are looking at the fundamental root of all human processes. In that, the fundamental source of pressure is necessary to initiate all of these processes. The 41st hexagram is the fuel or the pressure of an abstract stream in the sensing circuit, the stream of feeling. This stream is a uniquely human stream. It is the evolutionary and genetic material necessary for us to experience incarnation in a human form. Without this stream, the human evolutionary process would not exist. Not only are we speaking here of a fundamental pressure for our life process, but in particular, to understand it is not shared with any other form of life. This is a very specific pressure and a very specific stream that is directly associated with what we experience as being human. The 41st hexagram, as a codon in our genetic code, is the only initiating codon. In other words, it is an initiating codon in the sense that it is at the beginning in the genetic structure of everything. Thus, in beginning with the 41st hexagram, with the most important pressure in our evolutionary process now and ever since we became Homo sapiens, or modern humans. The 41st hexagram is the trigger that brought us into the stage that we are in, and we are still going towards completion. What is unique for us as human beings is the capacity to be able to feel. This capacity leads to the desire for experience. The desire for experience to be able to feel and manifest that feeling is the human evolutionary process. It is what drives us from one experience to the next, until we develop through that process. It also brings into play the nature of crisis. In other words, it tells us very clearly that the evolutionary process is rooted in crisis, change and transitoriness. The 41st gate, decrease, is the gate of contraction, and it says, the fuel in which there is the energy to feel, or not. So the whole capacity to feel, the complete potential that exists in our genetic spectrum, is rooted in the 41. In our work in looking at sexuality and human design, the 41 is the gate of fantasy, the capacity to be able to fantasize the feeling itself because all the feelings lie there. The old Chinese image of the 41 hexagram was the gardener who would cut back the garden in the winter time or fall, to prepare it for the following season. By cutting it back, nothing was lost, because all the potential of that plant, everything that plant could possibly be, every twig, every leaf and every flower was already there within it, contracted inside, held inside as a potential. So the 41st gate carries with it this enormous potential for any kind of experience. This is the key to what it is to be human. Its mechanic is that it is always about hunger. A human being is so different from its animal kin. They only have one kind of hunger, basic, predatory hunger to stay alive. But human beings have a duality in that. We have the material hunger, the hunger for survival, but we also have this other hunger, the deeper one, the human hunger for experience. To go to Mars and see what the rocks look like. What for? Just to see what the rocks are. To discover America. What for? Just to see what is there on the other side. So the first thing to recognize is that the basic fuel, the fundamental fuel for the evolutionary process, is the hunger to feel. The whole key to being an abstract being, whatever kind of abstract definition you have, is that the essential understanding about life is rooted in something very simple. One step after the other, don't repeat your steps. So look at what that really is saying, like the 64th gate in the Ina, because there is so much potential information. Built into these gates is a mechanism that is ready to release only one at a time. In other words, all those feelings are built up within the nature of the 41 as a resource. But if you look above the lines in the white book, it says, the limitation of resources which maximizes development of potential. If you have all these fantasies running around inside of you, it will diminish your potential. If you focus your energy, the name of this channel, on one fantasy, on one feeling, then you can move through that. And when it is over, you can go on to the next one. This is the key to the abstract process. This maximization of that potential by recognizing that this resource is always there. You don't have to have all the fantasies all the time, you can have one at a time and go through what is the correct evolutionary process. Remember, when you are looking at a hexagram, the first line is always going to represent not simply the foundation of the hexagram, but its essential truth. Gate 41 line 4, correction. When we get to the upper trigram, you get to a different kind of process because the 4th and 5th lines are oriented towards the other end of the channel. They recognize the potential at the other side through definition. By their very nature, the The fourth and fifth lines are the social lines because it is inherent in their genetic capacity to integrate and to look across the channel for the definition. Here, we are dealing with a very collective stream, with an experiential stream, a sexual stream. That means we are dealing with very powerful forces. The moment you come to the fourth line, you come to the fixedness of a fourth line. Fourth lines are unidirectional. They are fixed. The first thing we can recognize about that is that, given the nature of this gate, this is a very appropriate line. Decrease is designed to operate with one feeling at a time, with one fantasy you are focused on at a time. So this unidirectional capacity in the fourth line is of value. You are focused and fixed on your feeling, you are holding back all of this fuel waiting for the moment that the potential is there, because you can recognize that when the potential is there, you can get that energy across, focused on it. What often happens is that 41.4s get locked into being fixed on one feeling, one fantasy, and can be fixed on a certain feeling or fantasy for a very long time, even throughout their whole life, because it is this fixedness that is there. But there is a great advantage in that fixedness. The line is called correction. Successful adaptation to limitation. The limitation is, I am a fuel. I am not a potential. The limitation is very basic. In this line, the earth is exalted. When we have the earth exalted, you recognize that it is part of a regular cycle of the earth. It is something that is going to happen twice a year. It is a very strong grounding force in that sense. Out of the earth we get our basic security. Here, we have a classic line. Survival of the fittest, in the Darwinian concept, and its eventual flourishing. The fixedness of humanity on a feeling, on a fantasy, guaranteed that it would be the top of the food chain. We are to be at the top of the food chain. The survival of the fittest is our movement. The survival of the fittest is the perfection that comes out of being unidirectional in one's fantasy and feeling, to get there finally, to be able to fly, to be able to go to space, to do whatever the case may be and to be fixed on that. The Venusian side, the expenditure of energy on maintaining relationships rather than on correction. It immediately goes back into the powerful relationship field. In times of decrease, weak associations are shunned as costly, no matter how attractive. The survival of the fittest is that you are always in the process that you are fixed on, but you have to adapt along the way, otherwise you will never get to your goal. Here, the focus is different. The focus is pulled out to the other. Remember, that the fourth and fifth lines will always go across. By being pulled out to the other, it loses its fixedness, but it maintains the relationships. That is the other side of it. You have the fantasy that you want to be able to do something in a certain way, and the people that you are with do not want to do it that way. But they want to do something that is similar, but their way. You do not want to lose them, so you go along with that. Thus, you lose that fixedness, which is very important. These people can end up being very frustrated because they don't get to live out this experience. About 50,000 years ago, we got to the point of this line. It was probably around the same time that we began to have relationships with animals in which we could not simply kill them, but control them. This concludes the description of Gate 41, Line 4, Correction. Stay tuned for more human design content from HD Morf.